Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Labanotation Archives at the Ohio State University webinar. All attendees are joining as muted and your videos are not being streamed. This session is being recorded and we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar presentation, so you can add those to the chat box or to the Q&A box. And we will get started here in just a minute.
I was waiting, but you guys can't see that.
Okay, thank you for joining us today for the Labanotation Archives at the Ohio State University webinar. All attendees are muted. All attendees are not streaming videos. The session is being recorded, so that way you can view it at a later time. And we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar presentation, so you can add any questions in the chat box or into the Q&A box, and we will be answering those at the end. Thank you all for joining us today. And to kick it off, here's the presenter, Mara.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. I see in the participants list a really wonderful group of general interest, dancers, archivists, and library folks, as well as dance notation. My intention is really that you all have a chance to enjoy and celebrate these archives and maybe learn something, and I hope to learn from you as well. So in the chat in the end, please bring your questions, your comments on what you've seen. Just really looking forward to that Q&A portion at the end. I would also like to thank Ohio State University Libraries for inviting me today, and I would like to start with some gratitude and acknowledgements. First of all, I would like to thank and acknowledge the Dance Notation Bureau for the gift of the extensive Dance Notation Bureau collections that constitute the majority of the Labanotation collection and resources at Ohio State. I'd also like to thank the Cunningham Trust and Department of Dance faculty, Dr. Valerie Williams, B.B. Miller, Daniel Roberts, Dr. Hannah Kostrin, Chris Summers, and I would like to thank Nina Couch, longtime curator of TRI and now head of area studies and special collections at Thompson Library, or at university libraries. Nina played a foundational role in developing and caring for the collections that we will look at today. So thank you to all of those folks. So let's get started. So who I am Mara Frazier, Curator of Dance in the Jerome Lawrence and Robert E. Lee Theater Research Institute, part of, also known as TRI, part of Thompson Library Special Collections at Ohio State. I hold a BFA and MFA in Dance Performance and Notation from Ohio State, as well as a teaching certification from the Dance Notation Bureau in Labanotation. It is also my hope that in this session, in this moment of COVID-19, that we will have a chance to kind of think about something else other than the pandemic. And I want to mention that Labanotation, dance notation is a vast subject. The archives at Ohio State are vast. What we will look at today is really what was able to be scrounged together from digital images that we all had, since the libraries are closed right now. There's much more to see at OSU and always something to discover in this area, which is part of my excitement about it. Some of my, I'll be honest, with the vastness of the subject, when trying to talk about something like this with this group, I have maybe the slightest anxiety that someone really important will be forgotten or an important detail. So please contribute to the chat if you see an omission or something that was not acknowledged. So what are we talking about today? To me, the magic of dance notation, which is really systems of documenting dance, is that the notation connects us to the presence and potentiality of performance. Dance is a time-based, present moment performance. It is a phenomenon that unfolds. In many ways, dance is abandon. It is losing a sense of yourself in the movement. And dance scholars even often discuss how hard it is to study dance because it disappears. Yet it does remain. It leaves traces in the archives, in our bodies. And in order to center this phenomenon of dance, though, and kind of remember like what that feels like, I do want to start with a movement experience. So you'll be happy to know if you joined late, attendee videos are off. No one can see you, but we're going to start with a little dance. So and I'm going to invite you to join me. If you'll stand up, and I'm going to just do a little dance with you. So you start, you're going to begin. Let's see, I might need to, there. Begin standing, feet together, and we're going to take a little step back. Let's see, take a little step back. I'll mirror you. So back on your right foot, to your side, high on your toes of your left foot, and together. Now take your left foot, step forward, step high on your right, and underneath you together on your toes. So we have a little box step. And make sure you can see my feet. Let's try that again. We have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it has a rhythm to it. It has a flow. Let's try that one more time. You can even imagine you're waltzing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Keep going. 1, 2, 3. We're dancing at home with our computers. So the dancers in the group know we've been doing a lot of this. Everyone probably has some sort of space you've cleared out in this pandemic time to try to dance. And what was that really? That was our dance experience for the day. But what did we just do? It was very simple, but we can agree that we did a dance. We had some movement intention. We moved in a rhythm together. To different directions, stepping from one foot to the other. And there we are, all dispersed in our homes, but doing basically the same idea. So we've created a shared sensation, a shared movement experience or kinesthetic experience. And you may have a memory of what just happened with that step. This essentially is person-to-person transmission, which is central to practice and dance. That sort of, I show you, I explain, you try it, you mimic, and this is an age-old way that dance is transmitted. However, this type of transmission presents some challenges in dance practice and in scholarly study and preservation and recreation of more complex dance works. We have the Zoom recording of this session that would show me dancing and our memories, but how do we really get to and analyze the specifics of the movement? Well, Labanotation or kinetography Laban is the textual practice that that will really make, that kind of fills this hole, that fills this gap and allows us to analyze and document movement. Labanotation allows us to analyze specific body movements in space and time to a great level of detail. It is a graphic system of notation. It exists among many other forms of dance notation, including Ashfield-Bachman, Beauchamp-Fouillet, Stepanov, and Benesch notation, as well as other forms of movement analysis and documentation. Within the Laban framework, there is the language of dance and motif writing. There is Laban movement analysis. And while we won't focus on those today, those form part of the constellation of systems of documentation analysis of dance. And scholars might also use photographs, moving image, choreographers' notes, oral histories, and the embodied memories of dancers, directors, choreographers, and coaches in better understanding dance. So what we are going to focus on today, though, is Labanotation, or kinetography Laban. It stands out among the forms of dance notation as the primary internationally recognized system for the documentation of specific body movements in space and time. A Labanotation score can operate for a choreographic work the same way a musical notation score would operate for a piece of music. So we're going to talk about how Labanotation works just a little bit. And what we have here are some of the symbols from Labanotation. So on your left, we have a few of the direction symbols that form part of the basis of Labanotation. There looks kind of like a pointing finger pointing towards the top of the page for a forward symbol. Backward is the reverse, right and left arrows, and the rectangle in the middle is place, where you are. We can put levels, vertical levels, by shading the symbols with stripes, a shade, or a dot for middle level. And then there are many preset signs, a few of which are shown here for body parts. On the right, we have a simple sample of Labanotation. Thank you to Dr. Williams for providing this. And what's fun about this is it is actually notating the little waltz dance that we just performed. So how does this work? Labanotation is read from the bottom to the top of the page. So you start here and progress in time, moving up the page. And you could think of this like a musical notation score where you progress in time across, turned on its end. Excuse me. So there are notations to denote the time and time signature. Highlighted here, we have the time signature of a 3 over a 4. So that is a lot like in music. It's three notes to a measure, or 3 beats to a measure, and then the 4 is the quarter note, gets the beat. So here we have a little waltz that is counted 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we have a little tiny pin highlighted in purple. That gives an orientation of where the dancer is facing and would be updated as you move throughout the score as the dancer is dancing around. And then finally, down the staff, we have a center line. So the staff, across the staff, is the parts of the body. And those are kind of preset, so as you're reading, you would know, you would kind of know what parts of the body are being referred to. So there's that center line. On the right side of that center line is the right foot. On the left side would be the left foot, or right and left sides of the body. So this little dance that we're looking at starts with the feet together, and out here are the arms. The arms are down low, and then we step back low on the right foot, side high on the left foot, and underneath yourself on the right foot, there's our little waltz box step. We go forward, side high, and together. So what you just did is notated here. This is now we have a way to refer back to what was done, to analyze what the aspects of what happened there were, and really a text to come back to reflect this dance back to us. And that is the basics of how Labanotation works. So this may seem mathematical and exacting, like there's kind of a straightforwardness to it, but notation really is creative, which we can see when we look at a more complex sample of a score. So here is a tiny sample from Pray, choreographed by Department of Dance Emerita faculty Bibi Miller and Bessie Award-winning choreographer, and notated by Department of Dance faculty Dr. Valerie Williams, who's also a certified notator. So Pray is an ensemble dance. There's many more parts than this, but here's one little segment, and you can just see the increased complexity and lots of additional symbols on the page. There's a lot more happening here. And interestingly, I have a lovely quote here, if I can find it. Then I'm stuck. Okay, well, Dr. Williams writes about this process in her paper. I believe it's called Notating Dance's Reflexive Processes at Work. You can find that in the Journal of Movement Arts Literature. And to paraphrase, she talks about how when dancer and choreographer work in the studio together, when notator and choreographer are in the studio together, they will undergo a shared and reflexive creative process. So this act of writing notation is what I want to highlight here is that it's not just a mathematical recording of movement, it is a creative and generative process in which really a whole creative potentiality is identified of dance and of possibilities, really by getting into the specificity of movement. And that is part of the beauty of notation that I get really excited about. So let's look at the history of notation a little bit, since we'll talk more about the collections at TRI, but a lot of what is there is pictures from the past. So getting into the history. Labanotation was first published in 1926 by the choreographer and dance theorist Rudolf Laban in Germany. The vision at the time was to create a notation system for dance, a symbol system that would help to establish dance as a modern art form, equivalent to and independent from the other performing arts, and to establish a substantial theory of movement with a written component. Among Laban's early students and colleagues in 1920s and 30s Germany were Mary Wigman, Kurt Joost, and Albrecht Knust. And later, after the war, as modernism in dance continued to spread around the world, the theoretical developments and the notation system would kind of disperse from this time. Also important to note is that one student of Laban and a student who studied in Germany at this time was a young Helen Priest Rogers, who will come up later in the history of notation. So Albrecht Knust was also working with Laban in Europe and working to develop the Labanotation system. And as a result of the events of the war, the two were separated. In the last photo, we see Rudolf Laban speaking with Anne Hutchinson and Lisa Ullman in England, and Knust is here shown with Maria St. Paul. This is later in 1965, but you can picture the two of them, the three of them really working to develop the system of Labanotation in concert with others. So post-war, Laban established his life at Dartington Hall in England. He and Anne Hutchinson worked to continue developing theory. Knust was developing theory separately. Anne Hutchinson brings Labanotation to the United States, and really this is actually early, it's not even quite post-war. In 1940, the Dance Notation Bureau is formed. So Anne Hutchinson worked with Eve Gentry, Irmgard Bartenieff, Helen Priest Rogers, and Janie Price to found the Dance Notation Bureau. The mission of the Dance Notation Bureau, also known as the DNB, is to advance the art of dance through the use of a system of notation. So these wild women set out to advance the art of dance and to notate as many choreographic works as they could, and to promote teaching in Labanotation, education, to make Labanotation a part of dance education. Also shown in this photo, this is the only one that I couldn't quite place anyone based on the digital records I have at home, but Lucy Venable is also here in this photo. And you can see in the background, this is pre-smartboard, and the technology for teaching in the classroom was using these scrolls of notation on the wall. So there's rolls and rolls of scrolls hung up, and many of these scrolls do now reside at Ohio State in the libraries. So those are kind of a fun and interesting object of old notation technology. So these early notators are working to promote notation, notate as much as they can, and then in addition to master theatrical works by, for example, just a small example, George Balanchine and Doris Humphrey, Helen Tamiris. They are also trying to notate as many folk dances and promote the notation of folk and social dances. Here's a fun session in 1962. Pictured are Chubby Checker and Billy Mahoney, who was notating the twist along with Carl Waltz and Alan Miles. So meanwhile, let's see, I'm gonna make sure that I touch on this. Well, we'll look at a few fun pictures of young students learning Labanotation, just kind of seeing the joy in their faces and putting together a symbol with movement. So learning from the beginning that written dance can be part of dance education. Students being taught by Ann Hutchinson here. And Ann Hutchinson also taught Labanotation at the New York High School of Performing Arts, shown here. I love this picture of students dancing, working out their theory. So as I mentioned, Knust was developing kinetography Laban, and Laban and Ann Hutchinson, who did publish Labanotation, the textbook for Labanotation, were working as well. So how do these two systems of Labanotation and kinetography Laban find their reconciliation after the war? This is the reason for the foundation of the International Council of Kinetography Laban, also known as ICL. And ICL would meet, and still meet, to visit and, where possible, resolve the technical difficulties or disagreements that arose between the two systems. And an ICL technical session looks a lot like what's shown on this slide. Here we have Vera Maletic, who is dancing a score. Others are conversing over scores. So there's a lot of going over, and then ICL acts as a governing body. So the decisions are made about these items, as well as ideas and research shared. ICL continues to meet today. Here is this year's past conference in Mexico City. This is a fun workshop session. Researchers from Ohio State and around the world can submit their research and present at the ICL conference. So how did Labanotation and Ohio State get so connected? Ohio State has a long history of promotion, teaching, preservation, engagement with Labanotation and its related technologies. The story of how this happened has to do with Lucy Venable, who came to Ohio State to join the Department of Dance as a professor, and in 1968 brought with her the collection of master score manuscripts of the Dance Notation Bureau, founding the Dance Notation Bureau Extension at Ohio State. So this Dance Notation Bureau Extension would work closely over the years to promote teaching, research, and to take care of these scores. Some of the activities of the extension have been promoting technological tools for notation, which we'll talk about more. Also helping to coordinate through the DNB with restagings at Ohio State, and much, much more. So here's a group of notation women gathered around for the 1976 Laban Analysis Research Workshop. Left to right, we have Muriel Topaz, Lucy Venable, Odette Bloom, Irene Wachtel, Anne Hutchinson, and Philly Mahoney. So there's a long history of this connection between the Dance Notation Bureau and Ohio State's Dance Notation Bureau Extension. Here is Anne Hutchinson guest teaching in the Department of Dance in the old Studio One. So dance notation theory has been, or movement analysis as it's now called at Ohio State, has been a part of the major curriculum for a good amount of time since then, or really since before 1968. So that's part of the connection there. We'll continue to talk about that as we talk about special collections at Ohio State and how the Labanotation collection exists there now. The Theater Research Institute resides within Thompson Library Special Collections, and here is Thompson Library's West Atrium. So the Theater Research Institute and Thompson Library Special Collections reading room are kind of back on the center background of this photo, kind of behind things that you can see. And Labanotation is even worked into the architecture of the beautifully renovated Thompson Library. Really, almost exactly the step that we practiced together and notation that we read is on one of the foundation stones that's embedded in the floor of this ground floor, right outside the Berry Cafe. So when you are able to visit again, we all want to visit the library again. When you go, if you find that stone, you can now do the dance that's there. And there's also Labanotation in the elevator doors in the 11th floor campus reading room. And let's talk about what is actually in the special collections and how it functions. Here's the reading room with a researcher looking at hula dance, along with dance notation expert Rochelle Riggs-Leva, who is helping interpret the dance notation, and they're having a little exchange over these hula details. So this is the special collections reading room. It's a secure reading room that is open to anyone from the public to students, faculty, visiting researchers. And in the reading room, you can engage physically with these materials that they're not circulating materials. You can't check them out and take them home. It's really come and take a look at the materials. So this was a really interesting exchange because this world hula expert was able to give her input and reflect on kind of what she was looking at from the Dance Notation Bureau files on hula dance, musical scores, Labanotation scores. In the Special Collections reading room, there's also a dedicated classroom space that you see here. This is, it's so nice to see students' faces. This is the smiling faces of one of the Department of Dance undergraduate analysis classes in here, engaging with score manuscripts from the Dance Notation Bureau collection, with photographs, that you can see the teaching scrolls hanging in the background. So this reading room and classroom are really a lively place of engagement. Some of these students do creative projects based on what they engage with from the materials or other forms of research projects. Okay. So there are many treasures in special collections. Let me just describe the Dance Notation Bureau collection and some of the related collections for a moment. The Dance Notation Bureau collection is the largest one of Labanotation manuscripts and notation-related books in the country. So this is really exciting that we have this at Ohio State. Covered are every form of dance you can think of and many forms of movement, including modern and postmodern dance, ballet, jazz, folk dance, tap dance, athletic movement, yoga, and even the movements of robots, insects, and arachnids that are represented here. So with the mention of notation of insects, I want to celebrate one of the recent additions to the collections, which is the papers of Tony Intravaya. Tony Intravaya is shown here. She is learning a dance from a Native American dancer that she notated. And she really made it a mission to educate young people in dance notation, to undergo restagings. She restaged Doris Humphrey's Shakers at university campuses, as well as some other works, and to notate all forms, many forms of dances of worship and ritual dances. She also innovated, this is just a snapshot that I happen to have, and thank you to Tony Introvaya's family for that, of Tony Introvaya's innovations in notating the movements of bees. Bees have their dances to direct their colonies to sources of pollen. And so Tony Introvaya figured we can build out the staff to incorporate more appendages, more limbs. She also notated spiders, arachnids, and we have the images that she worked from, as well as her notation development work in the university libraries now. So in addition to master scores and things like this, we also have within the Dance Notation Bureau collection many photographs, ephemera. Many of the photographs that you've seen today come from the Dance Notation Bureau collection. Choreographers' notes, audio media, including oral histories from both the early days of the DNB and the later days of notation around the world, as well as musical accompaniments to dance studies and choreographic works, musical scores. So this really provides a place where someone could come to the reading room and engage with multiple drafts of a notation score and see kind of what process the notator or the transcriber went through in the autography, what may have changed in the choreographic work over the time. Now, we'll talk more about restaging, but for actual circulating scores, I just want to clarify the place to go to restage works would be still the Dance Notation Bureau Library, who handles the circulation, the royalty, structures, permissions, and rights to choreographic works. And so we'll look at their collection of, or catalog of notated theatrical dance. So just a fun piece of ephemera that I happen to have a picture of from the DNB collection. There are all kinds of ways of sharing dances, including this little flip book of ballroom dances put out by the Fred Astaire dance studios. Ohio State and Labanotation have a tight connection to development of technology over time. If you think about it, notators are working with sketches, maybe graph paper or another kind of notebook, shorthand in the studio as they're getting up and dancing, learning material. But how does that become this detailed and tidy score in the end? And several forms of technology have emerged to try to help with that. So looking back to the history of this, forgive me, this is a picture through glass, but it's just such a fun picture. I could not resist. Here we have Professor Lucy Venable using, it's called a sports analyzer, which is letting her look at film of movement frame by frame to better analyze. We also hold the manual and the typewriter ball, which is located here inside this IBM Selectric typewriter, and we'll take a closer look at it. There was an IBM Selectric typewriter ball developed with notation symbols on the ball, which makes beautiful, tidy symbols on the page, and it's just such an interesting little piece of technology. As a stop along the way with writing notation, it was difficult, to be honest, because you're trying to write vertically on a page and align symbols with a typewriter that's really meant to type horizontally, but a fascinating little object. Now, in 1987, Lucy Venable, Scott Sutherland, and David Rowley produced Laban Writer and continued to develop it over the years. And this was a drag and drop software or tool for writing Labanotation. And it was a huge advance. It allowed people to use a Mac computer to drag symbols and size them and place them along the staff, and to be able to copy and paste when there's repeated movements. And Laban Writer was offered free by the Ohio State University by the DNB extension over the years. Now, at this point, Laban Writer has become a legacy program. And our next phase of technology that is kind of part of the activities at Ohio State is the work of Dr. Hannah Kostrin and Chris Summers, I think to some extent, and probably some others, so forgive me if I'm forgetting, on Kinescribe. Kinescribe is for iPad. It's available on the App Store of Apple, the Apple App Store, as I believe a free download. And now you can have a mobile technology that really, this allows students in the classroom to be holding a tablet and reading from the score. Reading notation is very much a standing up and dancing process. So something that is that mobile, that can be held and edited on the fly, is really wonderful. And this has worked beautifully with Ohio State's digital flagship program, which has provided iPad Pros to every undergrad, and has also led to this analysis class becoming a technology integrated class that's offered online. So Kinescribe has been kind of one of the exciting developments. And even more cutting edge is Laban Lens, which is an augmented reality Laban editor and reader created by Chris Summers and Dr. Kostrin. And again, forgive me if I'm leaving anyone out. But this picture kind of shows the dancer's view, what she is partially seeing inside the lens. And the dancer can dance hands-free while either reading a score that they can see while seeing the environment they're in, or composing a score as they improvise. So again, this is kind of a site of generativity and creative process. In addition, Ohio State is a long-time site of restagings of repertoire. And this really is in close collaboration with the Dance Notation Bureau. So here's a view of the Notated Theatrical Dances catalog. And I highly suggest you check this out. You can see the hundreds of dances that are notated and available through the DNB. And they will work with you on getting access to the scores, getting permissions to actually restage works. And it's not a simple thing, it's a whole art, restaging from the score, but a lot of folks don't know what goes into that. So I wanted to make sure that I show this catalog and then highlight a few of the exciting projects of the last few years. How these connect to the libraries really is in the sense that in the special collections, we've got materials that can augment what researchers are doing. Students can come in, or researchers can come in and see special materials that are choreographers' notes, costume sketches. One exciting project in the Department of Dance and at the Wexner Center was the restaging of Totem Ancestor recently. Totem Ancestor is a 1956 piece of choreography by Merce Cunningham. And the notation score, excitingly, was written by, the original autography is by John Cage, Merce Cunningham's partner, and of course, seminal American composer. And the notation score is really beautiful, just to describe it, handwritten Labanotation, and then musical notation along the side for prepared piano. So Daniel actually restaged Totem Ancestor as an undergraduate student on himself as a dancer. Ended up graduating from Ohio State and joining the Merce Cunningham Company, and now has come full circle and returned to Ohio State as dance faculty, and was able to work with Professor Karen Elliott on the Wexner Center's Black Mountain Mini event in 2016, celebrating the legacy of the Black Mountain artists, including Merce Cunningham. So he restaged this work again. And so that's just one kind of exciting restaging activity. And it's really about recontextualizing these past works and kind of digging into this legacy of dance. Tommy Batchelor, shown here dancing or standing, being coached by Daniel, I believe was a undergraduate student at Ohio State at the time. So he's getting this chance to perform in this major work of repertory. So we have dance preservation and hands-on professional level learning happening. Another restaging project that I'm really excited about that I was involved in this year, thank you to Dr. Valerie Williams, to the libraries, including Nina Couch and Damon Jaggers, and the project also involved the Global Arts and Humanities Discovery themes and was supported by that, is a restaging of Anna Sokolo's rooms. This restaging was done as part of a project called Dance to You that I'm really excited about, because not only did this group of students shown here get to learn rooms and perform it and be coached by legacy holder of Anna Sokolo's foundation, Lori May, and to learn about how the Labanotation score kind of made this possible. So they're getting this very rich educational experience, but it also served as a site of community discussion. We took this project on tour, and this is really kind of all as a result of Dr. Williams' vision of how can we use dance to have a discussion about something in society that matters to people, and kind of bust open the library as well, and kind of engage these library materials with this social discussion. So how that worked was taking rooms on tour throughout the state of Ohio to rural communities, as well as performing at Thompson Library, and in tandem with Ballet Met, who performed another restaged work, a segment of the Four Temperaments. So having those performances in tandem with a discussion on campus mental health, an issue that's important really to everyone. So here is just an image of one of those panel discussions taking place in Thompson Library. The students and Ballet Met dancers did their performance there on the 11th floor, kind of turning the library into an impromptu performance space. And then we held this lively discussion afterwards, really talking about this issue of campus mental health and opening this up. So this tour went to some of the regional campuses, as well as Kenyon College, and the students really got this experience of representing themselves and their field and the legacy of their field in multiple ways. So I really love the way this project brings together kind of multiple aspects of dance, notation, and libraries. And so this is the type of project I get really excited about happening in the library. So really to close and conclude, I just want to emphasize that Labanotation, a Labanotation score, it is a source that disseminates and records a movement concept, but it also sparks new creative inquiry and creative practices. In addition, it provides a connection. It connected us to each other today as we all performed the same dance movement and were able to refer to the same dance movement in our globally dispersed homes. And it does the same thing across time for students and researchers when they go into the archives and look at a score and see what a notator's perspective on body movement was from a number of years ago. So I'd like to conclude with just that picture of notation as a site of generativity, creativity, and connection, and open up to questions. I've seen the chat lighting up throughout, so I'd love to dig into questions. Anything we don't get to, I will try to answer if possible via email. And just to remind you, this recording will be posted after the fact. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Mara. So I've captured a couple of questions that came through the chat. One that looks like it was answered through the chat. The question was, does the Dance Notation Bureau still exist? And it looks like several answered yes, but I wanted to see if you wanted to add to that.
Yes, did the folks who answered, I don't know if they gave any detail, but the Dance Notation Bureau is still a pretty vibrant hub of activity. I am not sure of like numbers of restagings per year and library consultations, but restagings as well as dance notation education. Over the years, dance notation was taught through the Bureau and promoted through in-person and correspondence courses, and you can still get certified in dance notation through the Dance Notation Bureau. What am I forgetting? As well as certified to teach Labanotation. So Dance Notation Bureau is alive and kicking, and I just strongly recommend anyone who's interested in dance notation connect with them first and foremost.
Great, thank you. Second question, is there a version of Kinescribe for Android or Windows, or is that only for iPhones?
So I'm not sure if I can see the full chat, but I would love to consult Dr. Costrin because I think I saw that she was here. I think that it's just iPad, but chime in if you know.
Yes, it looks like currently just for iPad.
And there are, I didn't mention, there are other technologies outside of Ohio State in development or that have been published for Labanotation writing. So there are other things out there, and some might be more accessible for non-Apple products.
Great, thank you. Third question, do the post-Laban writer programs allow a notator to create a full score, or are they only for reading?
Again, let's see if I can see chat so that I can, okay, good. Yeah, lots of comments in here. So I would say, speaking of Kinescribe, yes, and I think that capabilities are still being expanded out. I know that Kinescribe is in updates every year to make it easier to do full scoring. And you can definitely write and like drag things onto the staff in Kinescribe. And then the other programs I know less about. There was the Laban, I think allows creation of a full score as well. And I'm not sure if it's actually called that anymore. But I think this is really a gap that Kinescribe I know is working really hard to solve. I also believe that János Fugedi in Hungary also is working on a program or has published a program that can write full scores. But this isn't my area of expertise, so please anyone chime in if you have the answer there.
Okay, looks like there are some responses in the chat. Laban Lens is for a Microsoft product, HoloLens, but currently it's restricted to that hardware. We still use Laban Writer for scores. Let me see. It looks like there's a lot of good information in there. So I know there's a couple of other questions. One was, I would like to ensure if I've understood correctly, John Cage was using Labanotation.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi, Hannah. John Cage, I don't believe ever made a practice of being a dance notator, but is credited for the autography of that particular score. So, had at least copied the score. And as far as I know John Cage had a lot of his own creative forms of musical notation, and I'd be curious to know more about that, but that is the only scoring I know of. Also, just noticing from the comments, there's a mistake in my presentation. Totem Ancestor premiered in 1942, not 1956, so thank you to Lynn Weber for that.
Okay, great. Another question, will you give Labanotation course in any level at Ohio State? Correct me, Marcus, if I got that question wrong.
Hi, Marcus. The Labanotation curriculum for the majors is, it starts from a beginner level. And then for learning Labanotation, not for Ohio State students, you would want to go to the Dance Notation Bureau and consult with them.
Okay, great. I see the questions are still coming in. I see there are a few in the Q&A as well, so we're going to get to those too.
I'd love to answer BB's question in the chat.
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
So BB Miller asks, how has Labanotation taken on the various forms of improvisation? How might it represent improvisation scores or movement intentions that don't necessarily ask for specific motion? Thank you so much for this question. And Labanotation has some openness to it to incorporate improvisation. Some would be through ad lib symbols or other forms of qualitative, like effort notation. But really, when you get into scoring improvisation, that would probably be more motif writing and language of dance, which really shines for improvisational scores. I would say part of it is being able to remove if something is not determinate in time or determinate in the body, but it's more about a movement concept that can still be described in terms of its effort, the shape of the movement, something about the timing, or body sensibilities. There's a lot of capacity in the notation system. You can talk about an unfolding motion or a spiraling motion. You can do a lot of things, but really motif will make it easier for that. And the last part of your question about movement intention. Movement intention is complicated. It may involve the effort or the timing, but the intention may be something harder to describe. And I think this is a great area to develop and build out in systems of analysis. So thank you.
Okay, next question. What is happening now to teach Labanotation to young students?
I can speak to this as a former high school educator. Labanotation is definitely, at least in the United States, I don't know of any place that it's mandated to teach Labanotation as part of an arts curriculum. But I would say among the community of public educators and some studio educators, Laban concepts are in the air, used more among some than others. I would also point to the language of dance, and I think the language of dance's organization, and there's a book called Language of Dance. Language of Dance is training educators, really, I think, to build out an understanding of dance analysis and notation that goes in tandem with learning movement from an early age. There are probably other activities that I don't know about. I think of also, my pronunciation may be bad, but Henrik Kovacs in Hungary, who has developed a system of cards to teach folk dance rhythms and notation symbols to young children there. So that's one example that I know of.
Okay, these are great questions. If there is more than one dancer, is that notated with a second vertical line of markings to one side?
Yeah, it's notated with a second step. that is, right, it's alongside each other. So if you have even maybe 7 or 8 dancers doing different parts, that may take 2 full pages of staffs just for each part, and then they'll be labeled with dancer A, B, C, or the dancer's character, if that's the case. So it definitely gets more complicated, much like a conductor's master score.
Okay, great. Next question, are there other places that have a dance archivist? Why is this role so important for dance research / creative expression?
Oh yeah, that reminds me too. I wanted to mention kind of in closing that this role that I'm in, it is unique, but yes, they are in other places. So the role that I'm in of curator of dance was created in 2018-19 at Ohio State in order to promote the rich holdings of Ohio State of all dance and movement, but really with a special focus on the legacy of Labanotation in the collections and of dance, really an attention to the emergence of dance notation in all its forms. So this role is really special in that it serves to ensure the legacy of Labanotation at Ohio State and to protect the Dance Notation Bureau collection, preserve it, and to continue to develop collections in this area. So I don't know of a role exactly like that. It gets me really excited, but I do know that dance companies and dance organizations have archivists. And then there are other libraries of dance that have a curator role or a dance librarian role. There are a good number of them. Library of Congress has huge dance collections. The Jerome Robbins Dance Division in New York City, the Folkwang in Essen. There are centers in France and England and UCLA. I can't name them all, but this is definitely, I think I heard the first part of the question, are there other dance archivists? But I forget the second part of the question. Do you remember, Casey?
Yes, it was, why is this role so important for dance research or creative expression?
Yeah, so thank you. So why is it so important? I really feel it's important because I see dance as discourse, because dance is discourse. I mean, dance is the phenomenon of movement that we just do, but it is also a conversation that we have with others in the world and with other points in time. So archivists and curators can hold some of that story through the texts and traces and documents that are created, and then can kind of speak for those voices or connect artists, students, researchers to those voices from the past. So that's why the role is important.
Okay, great. So we had a lot of great questions in here. I see there is one more that I believe we did not answer in the chat, and that one we will personally follow up regarding the materials for your thesis. So we'll follow up with you personally on that. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A that I don't think we'll be able to get to today, just to be within the time frame here. So we will be sure to get all of these questions that you entered in the Q&A answered, and we will submit those when we send out the recording of the webinar. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for being interactive. I know I'm, a pro now with my box step. Thank you, Mara, and thank you everybody who had a hand in this presentation. It looks like there was a lot of great responses, and so we thank you again for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.